G'day guys, I was recently joined by Daniel Harrison who went undefeated with the World Eaters at a recent event where he ran two Helbrutes, a really interesting and unique list that went 6-0 at a 200 plus player major event. So we get stuck into talking about his list, the unique and interesting elements of it, every game that he played in detail, what worked, what didn't work, what he would change about the list going forward, and then we finish the conversation off chatting a little bit about the upcoming balanced data slate and any potential upcoming World Eaters Codex desires. So let's get stuck straight into the video.
Look for the Blood God.
G'day guys, I just wanted to take a second to talk to you about the exciting Blog for the Blood God fundraiser raffle, where you can buy tickets for your chance to win a set of neoprene objective markers and a pack of 50 Blog for the Blood God dice. If you'd like to buy some tickets, click on the link in the description of this video. You can scroll down and view the prizes there, and if you'd like to buy some tickets, select buy tickets, select how many tickets you would like to buy, select that you are over 18 and that you agree with the terms, and then I would recommend deselecting the subscription because who needs unnecessary emails, and then you can proceed to fill out your details. If you are an Australian resident, you will be required to select your state. If not, just select any state. It doesn't particularly matter as long as the street address and details of postage are correct as per above. And then you can go through, proceed on payment, and then it will submit your ticket sales. The reason we've decided to do a raffle in order to raise funds is because this year I have been named as captain for Team Australia for the WTC World Team Championships of Warhammer 40k. This is a once-in-a-lifetime, really exciting opportunity for me. However, as an Australian, that trip is extremely expensive, and unfortunately, life does what it does and has thrown a bunch of unforeseen expenses my way in the terms of veterinary bills for my very sick cat. So any help that we can get to send me to Europe to represent Australia would be greatly appreciated. And also, if there's any money left over at the end, it will go towards improving the quality and frequency of the content here on YouTube. So I very much appreciate any support that you are prepared to give, and I look forward to rewarding that with some exciting prizes. If this does well, we'll do multiple of these raffles because I've got plenty of stuff to give away, and I really do want to show some support for the community that supports me so well. So thank you very much for your consideration. If you'd like to buy a ticket, links are in the description below, and let's get into today's video. All right, Daniel, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to come and chat with us about your recent success with the World Eaters. Did you want to maybe just introduce yourself to the listeners, let them know a little bit about yourself before we get stuck into the juicy stuff about the event and your list?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Harrison. I live in the U.S. I've been in Warhammer. I started right at the end of 8th, going into 9th with the whole pandemic lockdown. I started out playing World Leaders and Death Guard. But then when I saw World Leaders come out, I knew that that was the army that I wanted to play in 9th, and I fell in love immediately with the army, the whole play style, the aesthetics, everything about it. I just really loved. I loved the 9th edition World Leaders, where when my units would die, it would just make the army stronger. And I kind of missed out about 10th, but that's what really made me fall in love with the army, because everybody's just having fun when you're playing World Leaders game.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. So were you into 40k as a kid and then you've come back into it recently, or is it something that you only just recently discovered?
Oh, so I grew up playing Magic the Gathering. I would go into local game shops, and I'd see people playing Warhammer, and I was always interested in it, but I never really had the time or the money to invest to learn how to play it until the pandemic happened. And then I had all the time in the world. So I used that opportunity to jump in both feet and learn everything I could about the Warhammer universe, the tabletop, everything, because it's just there's so much deep lore, so much to learn about the tabletop game. I mean, it's just hours and hours of entertainment.
Yeah, sounds good. That's awesome to hear. And I think you've picked the right faction. You've picked one of the most fun, so you've landed on the perfect starting point as far as I'm concerned. So good job with that. let's talk a little bit about the event that you attended recently, because you went undefeated, correct? So tell us a little bit about the event, the format, and that sort of stuff, and what your overall results were, and then we'll break down in detail your list and each game.
Okay, yeah. So I attended the Rocky Mountain Open, which is a frontline gaming event, and I went 6-0 at about there were about 200 players, give or take a handful of players, and the event was all player placed terrain. I think it was the last one that they did that was player placed, and I think that had a huge impact on how the World Eaters Army was able to perform by being able to set up staging areas very effectively to be able to control board threat projection from the units, from the safety of walls that you're able to set up and predetermine. So I think that was a big part of why I did so well at that event.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of player placed for World Eaters players specifically, because we have such long movement distances, but we can measure out exactly where we can move to, so you can put somewhere that you're safe in your deployment, and then somewhere that you can definitely move to and remain safe, and also pairs really well with the scout moves as well. What sort of terrain was it? Was it
amazing
like,
with the scout?
Was it like GW type terrain that you were then able to player place, or was it like WTC style little L's that you were able to place with your, player place rules? What sort of terrain was it?
So they had a mix. They had some frontline gaming terrain pieces, but then they also had the little GW plexiglasses that you would place on top of it. So it made for a extremely dense board, which was fantastic because it shut down a lot of shooting lanes, which was great for me. I had a little bit of shooting in that list, as much as the World Eaters list is allowed to take, which is not a lot, but. I think the fact that the bases, we were constricted on some tables on how much terrain we could even place physically on the board, given all of the constraints of being X amount of inches away from each other and the board and be in the center. So there were times where me or my opponent would get to our last piece and be like, "Oh, do you mind if I move this piece I already put down over so I could put my last piece down, because I can't." Given the constraints that they told us about for the player place terrain. So with such a dense board like that, there was cover everywhere for me, and it really allowed, especially the Helbrutes, to march up in relatively safe staging points throughout, as well as giving, a little spoiler alert here for the list, Dolores Skulls and Angron amazing starting deployment locations.
Yeah. No, sounds like the perfect storm. But now that we've got all that, let's actually talk about the list, because I remember reading it and going, whoa, this list is a bit out there. This is a bit different. And then seeing you come back with that undefeated result, it's like, okay, there's something going on here that I don't see immediately. And if I'm not seeing it immediately, I guarantee that there's a lot of people that are not seeing it. So run us through the unique list that you took and all the different elements. And then when we talk about your games, you can really break down the reasons that each unit is there.
Sure. So starting off with the characters, I had the big angry man himself, because who doesn't want to bring Angron? I had a Lord on Juggernaut, the Demon Prince with wings, 2x10 Jackals, 2x2 Chaos Spawn, two Helbrutes, with Multi-Melta and Fists, and Khorne Lord of Skulls. Let's see, am I missing anything?
Oh, your camera's just dropped out, by the way.
Oh, sorry about that. Oh, and then, sorry, it cuts out when I check my list. And then 6 normal 8-bound, not exalted, but just the normal. And I chose that list. One, because I felt like the Helbrutes had a lot of play and synergy with having 2 big monsters on the board. I've been playing the Lord of Skulls for a while now. I brought it to LVO, and I did all right. I got some got a little unlucky with some of the dice rolls, but that happens. So I've been playing the Lord of Skulls for a while, and I just really love the model, because who doesn't love a big stompy Lord of Skulls?
Yeah, the Lord of Skulls
So
is one of
I
my
found
favorites.
Oh, it's amazing. The sculpt is quintessential 40k,
Yeah.
and I absolutely love it. So I found that the Helbrutes were able to march up the board with almost impunity, because my opponent's anti-tank weapons was directed at Angron, which was shoved in their face, and the Lord of Skulls, which was also up, but tried to kind of hide it as much as I could, or only expose one firing lane, so if they put fire into it, it wouldn't kill it in one turn. So having the Helbrutes available really got a lot of value in the later half of the game, once they were able to foot slog it all the way across the board and get into contact there. The Demon Prince was there as a deep strike threat. It was kind of a holdover from my previous list, because I used to put the glaive on him, but I found that the enhancements since the last nerfs just aren't worth their points. I really wanted more stuff, and I tried to, even though I'm taking a lot of Lord of Skulls and Angron, which are a lot of points for 2 models, I tried to take a lot of trash with the 2 Jackals, the 2 Chaos Spawn, and then the Helbrutes also did some action from time to time as well, when I really needed something to get done.
Yep. It's such a unique list. I really, really like it. The Helbrutes are one of those units that I think people underrate at their own peril. Before we get into the games, did the fighting multiple times, did that come up very often?
It did, and we talked to a judge about it and made sure that it was okay, that yes, it is allowed to fight multiple times. Otherwise, why would you have that rule on the data sheet if it didn't work at all? Because I know there's a lot of debate. There's a lot of debate about it online, of whether you're technically allowed to do it or not. But it's why have it if it doesn't work?
Exactly.
So I think that's a rules as written versus rules as intended type thing. But we talked to the judge with my opponents and made sure, and I talked to them ahead of time, my opponents too, saying, hey, just so you know, it can do this, and just be careful of this. And but it did get quite a bit of value, because they don't have a ton of attacks, the Helbrutes. So being able to activate twice in a fight phase if you're charging, it really helps put down threats that normally 130 points, 150. Sorry, cut out again. 140 points. That 140 points usually can't chew through. And then that also allowed, because I'm taking all this tough stuff, it really allowed the 1 unit of 8-bound to shine as well. Having that scout move, and even without Invocatus, having that scout move default on their data sheet really allowed me to put a lot of first turn pressure on my opponent between that and Angron, where they were still deploying relatively far back, and effectively giving me the free first turn to just be in cover and set up my army the way that I need to.
Absolutely. All right, so that all sounds fantastic, and I'm sure we'll dig into those in a little bit more detail as we go through the rounds. I'm not going to ask you to fully break down every game, because otherwise, A, you'll probably forget stuff, and B, we'll be here forever. So I think the best way to do this is just talk about the faction that you versed, and then just give us 1 or 2 highlights from the game that you felt were influential in you winning. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Hi, I'm Dean Simbeck, President and CEO of Blog for the Blood God's exclusive high-quality dice warehouse and emporium. Due to a shipping error, I'm currently overstocked with Blog for the Blood God exclusive high-quality dice, and I'm passing the savings on to you! Roll 9-inch charges, pass invulnerable saves, roll high for damage, and score lots of hits. Check out the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today.
Okay. So the first round, I played Tyranids. My opponent had not been to a lot of tournaments, so it was more of an instructional game and just trying to have fun, throw dice, because it was his list just didn't have the tools that were needed to answer Angron and the Lord of Skulls, because it's a stat check, and if you just don't have the tools, you have no chance to win the game. So we just tried to focus on just having a good sportsmanship, just chatting. But that game was pretty solidly decided after turn 2. So there wasn't a whole lot going on there other than Angron killing things and the Lord of Skulls killing a lot of things as well.
Yeah.
He brought kind of a 40 list, and the 8 bound with the number of attacks that they have. I mean, they just chewed through it left and right. Same with Angron, and then the shooting from the Lord of Skulls. So yeah, that was a pretty quick game. Great opponent though. I can't say anything bad about him. He was amazing. Yes. But that's where the easy games stop.
Yeah.
I had the first one, and then every single one after that was just a real strain, I guess.
Yeah.
So the second game was against Chaos Space Marines.
Okay.
And boy, was that rough. He brought a very shooting heavy list, which I wasn't expecting. I looked at his list and I thought, I've got this, no problem. It's going to be easy. And then I saw the 2 Vindicators, what they could actually do on the field with the amount of sustained and lethals and everything that he can do on those Vindicators, plus 2 Predators, and then the Helbrute giving them both. And it was a lot more shooting than I was expecting. But that game pretty much came down to one turn where my Lord of Skulls went into a Vindicator, and I thought, no problem. Lord of Skulls with his flat 8 damage is going to slice this thing in half, no problem. It's got no invulnerable save. And then I proceeded to just roll all ones.
Oh, no.
I think I rolled... Yeah, the poor Lord of Skulls. I rolled I missed every single hit roll except for one, and then I rolled a 1 to wound. So he didn't even take a save. There was nothing that could have been done. And unfortunately, he then brought down the Lord of Skulls, which was a big swing, and Angron. I think it was the 3rd battle round. And so at this point, I'm just trying to play. I was at least able to refuse him the first couple of turns primary on the left flank because of that. And then the Helbrutes are just amazing bully pieces. When you're skirmishing on a flank, those guys are almost unmatched, because any Space Marine body they send over is just going to get slapped down real hard. Anything really that they send, especially having 2 of them, I was able to tie down that other flank pretty easily with those 2 Helbrutes. Which stalled the game long enough for me to be able to bring back Angron at the end of the game to be able to pull out a victory.
Yeah.
So that was one of the
sometimes those late game resurrections are the best.
Oh, it's amazing. Especially having the Jackals there on points to help reroll dice without the enhancement, because I didn't bring the enhancement in my list to reroll dice to help fish for bringing Angron back. But instead, what I would do is almost every time I killed a unit in combat, is spend the CP to roll the dice and just hope. And I think that's actually how he came back, Angron, and I was able to rapid ingress him at the end of the game, and he really he scored me a ton of points at the end. Having that body. I found that Angron, when he comes back, he usually doesn't kill a lot, but he'll score a ton of points because he's just another big body where you need him at the end of the game.
Yeah, and he's got decent OC value. Sometimes, like I had a game recently where my opponent had killed Angron, and then with this big scrap going on in the middle, and then in my last turn, I've resurrected Angron and then drew Capture Enemy Outpost, and I'm like, yep, well, you've abandoned your outpost because you're fighting World Eaters. Why do you need to defend your your outpost? And then I've just gone, boop, Angron on the outpost. That's 8 points. That's then a bunch more primary points. It denied him points. It was this huge swing, and he's just like, how could I have possibly seen that coming? And I'm like, well, it happens.
Yeah, so I thank thanks to Angron coming back, I was able to pull that one out. I had some bad dice with the Lord of Skulls just whiffing that Vindicator, and then that Vindicator killing the Lord of Skulls. But the dice gods giveth and they taketh away. So
yeah, they absolutely do.
The next the next game I played, Grey Knights, and that was streamed on War Games Live on their main channel, and that was another hell of a game. There were some early, so that was a Grey Knights list that was a Land Raider Redeemer. I want to say 5 or 6 Nemesis Dread Knights, including the characters, and then some 3 Helbrutes and a squad of strikes for secondaries. So
lots of
this opponent
bodies.
also had a very similar skew list, because they're trying to go for a lot of toughness 8 plus bodies. Luckily, there's a lot of strength in World Eaters. So that game, it was streamed online, so the viewers can take a look at how that game went. But just some of the key parts there was I think that my opponent did not fully grasp exactly how far the 8-bound could go, and then with a pile-in, I was able to tag 2 of the Dread Knights in the same turn. I should have killed them both, but dice. So I only killed one and brought the other one down to a bit. But it was really damaging how much I was able to take out by how fast they move and then advance and charge, and then just the sheer amount of dice that those things put out, putting a lot of saves, even on tougher vehicles like that, with a stratagem for +1 against vehicles and characters. They still put out almost as much damage, if not more, I think, than the Exalted 8-bound. I know a lot of people run the Exalted, but I really find that the extra attack that the normal 8-bound have, plus they're cheaper, I really like that. And then for that game, my kind of strategy going into it was trying to split up his shooting, because Angron and the Lower Skulls are durable, but if they take an entire army shooting to their face, it's a coin flip whether they live or die. So if you're able to try to split your enemy's firing lanes on the Angron or Lower Skulls and try to put half into each, that's ideal. Opponent split fires, both of them end up living, which happened, and then I was able to advance forward and really take a big chunk of flesh for Khorne.
Yeah.
And then had some unlucky dice for Angron on his saves against the Helbrutes, or the Armiger Helbrutes, yeah. Because it was -1. I had like 3 up saves, I think, or 2 up saves, and I just failed a whole bunch of them. So that was, Angron went down a little bit earlier than he probably should have, which was unfortunate. And that was a game where I don't believe that I got him back in that one. But again, the Helbrutes were able to do a lot of work, because at that point, he was exposed. He had brought all of his Dread Knights up to try to deal with the Khorne Lord of Skulls and Angron. So then they were able to just punch right into those things, and they do a lot of damage to those Nemesis Dread Knights with their Meltas and their fists.
Did you find the melters useful?
So,
I know a lot of people that I know, when they're running Helbrutes, they run the double fist so that they get the reroll wounds and the 2 heavy flamers. I noticed yours had the multi-melters, which is also, I think, a good choice, but I just wanted to sort of get your thoughts on how they performed.
To be 100% honest with you, I probably would prefer the double fist and flamer, but I just don't have them modeled that way.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Mine have the Melta. So I just I ran them with what I had. In the Melta, it did work out in quite a few games where it kind of deterred my opponent from shooting at them, because you don't want to take Melta shots, especially if they're in Melta range, to the face for free. So sometimes my opponent just wouldn't even shoot them because they were too scared of the Melta, which was great for me.
Yeah, that's very true. That's a good point.
The real MVP that game, though, was some Chaos Spawn that made it onto my opponent's home objective and took 3 turns to bring down a Armiger Helvrin to actually win me the game at the very last turn, where it allowed me to score enough points where it put the game out of reach for my opponent, no matter what they did in their last battle round.
Yeah, the Spawn, I think Spawn are also one of those somewhat underrated units. I know a lot of people will take 1 unit of them, but they are so tough, and they actually, like you said, over a couple of turns, you know, if you funnel some CP into them, they're going to kill things. So I think they're actually pretty good. They're interesting.
Oh, I absolutely love Chaos Spawn. If I could take a squad bigger than 2, I absolutely would. And every time I write a list, I almost always start at least 1 unit of Chaos Spawn. They are just amazing skirmish pieces, and they're so durable with the 4-up Feel No Pain. If you take the extra Feel No Pain for the turn.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about your round 3? How did that one go for you?
Sorry, round 3. First was Tyranids, then Chaos Space
that's
Marines.
right. Yeah,
that
sorry,
was
round 4.
The Grey Knights there.
My apologies.
Yeah, so that's fine. Round 4, let me just double check this. Yes, was against Thousand Suns. So before I even got to take my first turn, my opponent got first turn. He jumped Magnus way out and nuked my Core Lord of Skulls. I didn't even get to play with him that game. So he killed him before I got to do anything. I know. It's so durable, but Magnus really puts out the hurt.
Yeah, he does. I'm assuming he threw a Doom Bolt in as well.
Doom Bolt. He paid for the extra strats, everything. He just poured everything in. And I'm thinking, oh great, okay. Well, at least Angron's in a position where I've got an 8-inch charge. I can go out. I can go get Magnus, no problem. It's gonna be fine. And Angron's got this. Sure enough, I go out. I fail the charge. I re-roll the charge. I fail the charge again. Double 1s on both of the charges.
Wow. You need some advice, bro.
So poor Angron's just floating out in the wind right in front of Magnus, 8 inches away from Magnus when it's my opponent's turn. So before, of course, he kills him. So I'm thinking, before I take my turn 2, like, oh great, the game's over. I've lost half of my army. I can't possibly come back from this, right? Somehow, I end up pulling that out. What had happened is, because he had shifted Magnus so far over, he kind of seeded the rest of the board on primary. So my thought was, okay, I'm playing from behind now. What I need to do is I need to take out his Rubric Marines, because Thousand Suns are incredibly expensive. The rubrics are and characters. Each of those bricks is a lot of points. So I was able to eat my 8-bound across the table, and I was able to tag up a couple of the units and really starting to do work. And what's really good into Space Marine bodies is Chaos Spawn. So I had a unit of Chaos Spawn in reserves that I brought in from reserves, and they were also just wrecking havoc in the backfield. Absolutely wrecking havoc for him. So even though he killed my Lord of Skulls turn 1, killed Angron turn 2, I'm pushing him back onto his home objective, and move blocking his Magnus with a squad of Jackals that were just ran out right in front of him. Didn't charge him because I didn't want him to kill free Jackals. But basically just kind of stared up at him, stopping him from scoring primary. And then, as luck would have it, Angron ended up coming back that game and got his revenge against the Bird Boy.
Nice. I was waiting for that. I was like, surely losing those two that early in the game and winning the game, I'm like, the Hangron has to have came back at some point. Like, but no, it sounds like you played it quite well. You identified that there was the challenge was that, you know, you needed to score those primary, you needed to score those, you know, secondaries, and you can do that without Angron and without the Lord of Skulls. It's still doable. So you used your elements wisely to put score on the board. Yeah, sounds like you just played it well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, because it was hard not to feel despair,
Yeah.
losing Lord of Skulls and Angron before I get my second turn. I mean, that just hurts you right in the gut. Um, but really staying in the game, trying to score every point. And I mean, my opponent was just as surprised as I was when Angron came back, and then all of a sudden, turn 4, the board looks a whole lot different when Magnus is no longer there and Angron is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a huge flip.
So exactly, yeah, and staying focused on that primary and that board control, which World Leaders really allow you to do. Even if you are losing a lot of pieces, if you can push the game out long enough and maintain that board control, you really have a good chance of winning just on primary alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Moving on to the fifth game. Sorry about the camera again there.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Chaos Demons. So Chaos Demons, I've played this matchup before in a local RTT by my local shop, and it had Shalaxi, which is just absolutely terrifying to Angron or the Lord of Skulls, because Shalaxi will one tap either of them very easily. So my whole mission was to not let Shalaxi get into combat with the Lord of Skulls. If she goes into Angron, that's okay. Angron can come back if the Lord of Skulls kills some stuff. That's all right. I'm okay losing Angron, but I can't let Shalaxi get in range of my Corn Lord of Skulls. So
Yeah.
the whole time I'm just trying to screen it out. Yeah, with Chaos Bond, with Cultist. One lucky break that I got kind of early on is I screened out my entire deployment zone turn 1, so he couldn't pick up a unit and put it down.
Yeah.
And then I decided to do, because I know I wasn't going to be aggressive turn 1, I decided to pick up Fight on Death turn 1, which I almost never do, but he had fixed secondaries of deploy teleport homers and behind enemy lines. So I knew he really wanted to get in my lines, and he had some seekers. So I figured he was going to scout them up, move them in, and try to charge something. So I thought, okay, well, if I fight on death, there's a good chance that I might be able to pick up a squad. And sure enough, that's exactly what he did. He found some jackals that were out, and he shot his seekers in to try to kill them. He did kill the whole unit. But I had enough fight on deaths on some of the key units. The jackals actually took out a squad of seekers, which was huge, and put him behind early in that game. So surprisingly, those jackals that died turn 1 were kind of the MVP, because they put me forward points wise in that game because of his fixed secondaries. He just couldn't max out his secondaries anymore with that turn 1. So I was able to play a very passive game, which was good because I had the board state, I had the points lead, and I just kind of sat back. And unfortunately, he waited a little too long to try to push up and engage, and that gave me the win.
Yeah, it sounds like you've mastered one of the biggest skills World Eaters players need, which is the ability to know when to play passive and when to play aggressive. That's one of the things I see a lot of people struggle with, is they're always just charging everything all the time. They're getting in their opponent's deployment zone, they're doing all this damage, but if your opponent's taken behind enemy lines and deploy teleport homers, well, maybe the idea is not to take their backfield, because if you do that, you're sacrificing your own, and then they're going to get in there and they're going to max out their secondaries. So taking information like what secondaries your opponent has selected and then making that influence your game plan is something that I think a lot of World Eaters players struggle with, but it sounds like you've got it covered, so well done.
Absolutely, especially with a slippery army like that. They're in Bellicor providing the aura that he does. It's really important to not overcommit too early, because again, there are some armies out there that will really punish you if you overcommit at the wrong time. Like a Shalaxi, I mean, that keeps me up at night. That's terrifying. So really, and also knowing what units are okay to trade too. So the spawn, the Helbrutes, those are all expendable pieces where I'm okay putting those out there. If it means I get the first hit on Shalaxi, where it's basically just a game of 4-ups.
Yeah. Yeah, because that Shalaxi, she's really hard
so
to
yeah,
kill.
that was. Sorry, go ahead. No, sorry, the delay. Go ahead.
So yeah, I was just saying that Shalaxi, she's a really hard unit to kill, very hard to put down. So making sure that you time it right, where you go, cool, this is the turn where the Lord of Skulls is going to put a bit of shooting into her, soften her up. Then Angron's going to charge her, and maybe the Lord of Skulls charges as well, just so that her feel no pain and her 4-up invulnerable saves. You know, if they spike or something like that, you've still got enough damage to put her down. Because, like you said, if she touches either one of those guys, she's going to one-shot them. But you're not likely to one-shot her in response because she's significantly tougher. So making sure that you manage your resources there, and like you said, you pick good trades. You can sacrifice a Helbrute because that's not going to help you deal with Shalaxi. But if you lose that Lord of Skulls early, you're in a world of hurt.
Exactly, and the Helbrutes are their fight twice is no good if they're completely dead from Shalaxi on the first go.
Yeah, 100%.
And so I think that that's a good point, because that also is target priority for those Helbrutes, and really picking targets where they do get the most out of their fight twice when you're charging, and their shots back with the Melta. So I think part of it is knowing when to charge, and then when you do charge, just target priority. A lot of the times, I would send my unit of 8-bound into something that took a lot of attacks to put down. So, for instance, he had a unit of pinks that I actually sent my 8-bound back into my deployment zone to go kill those pinks, because I knew that they were the only thing in my army that could kill a squad of pinks in one go without having to spawn a bunch of blues and brimstones and take 2 or 3 turns to kill that squad. Even though it was kind of unproductive to send them backwards, sometimes that's what you have to do to put the right tool into the right target.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Sounds like you knew their faction and your faction well enough to know where to place your resources and where to sort of take that sort of initiative. You know, I often find that the person who's deciding what fights where, they're often the person that ends up winning. The person who dictates, and the World Leaders are one of the best factions in the game at that, because everything in the army is so fast, and because it's all combat based, means you can run through walls, you can do your stuff, there's not much they can really do to stop you. So leveraging that to go, you know what, oh, you've got your pink horrors, cool, I'm going to send 8-band into that, I'm going to send spawn into this, I'm going to spend, you dictate what fights what, and that's always a massive advantage, as opposed to being like a really tough army that just has to take a punch to the face. We have a massive advantage in that regard. So yeah, it sounds like a big win, good game, and then this would lead us into your final round, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So this brings us to round 6. I saw the matchups, and it was a Necron Catan list. And it was funny because I was texting my local gaming group saying, okay, there's a 20% chance I win here, because my list is not designed to handle Catan whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's really unfortunate with the nerf to the glaive, because I used to put that on my Demon Prince specifically for Catan, because he would actually do the most damage into them.
Yep.
He would have his damage half down to 2, and he could potentially get +3, so he would do 5 damage swing into Catan, which was phenomenal, rerolling hits and wound if that was the one that he picked. So that was really my tech for them, and then that just disappeared. So I was terrified going into this list of it had the Nightbringer and 2 Transcendents.
Okay.
And it was the Hypercrypt.
Yep.
Luckily, I had some good terrain placement that really let me leverage threat projection on the 8-bound and gave me pretty good shooting at shooting line for the Lord of Skulls. One thing I haven't really talked about is the Lord Skull shooting. But I found just having that little bit of shooting to clear screens had been absolutely tremendous in a lot of my games, because so many times before I was running the Lord of Skulls, I'd just get move blocked and I
Yeah.
couldn't really get where I wanted to go. So having that to get rid of screens really opens up a lot more of the board for your 8 bound, for Angron, for the Helbrutes to get where they need to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, in this game, yeah, I was able to leverage the 8 bound moving up. The Lord of Skulls had a great shooting line, and then the Helbrutes just started to move them up the board, and just try to be bait for the first, because I really couldn't sacrifice anything else, because I needed the Jackals and the Chaos Spawn to screen, because again, Hypercrypts, you can just jump anywhere. And what had happened, because I mean, six rounds is a long time. People get tired. There's a lot of mental fatigue, and it's absolutely real. Um, Played at the top tables and being undefeated really takes a toll on you. I mean, anytime you play 6 games of Warhammer in 2 days, it really takes a toll on you. So I think he made a couple of mistakes that I was able to capitalize majorly off of. He went a little too aggressive, I think, with his Catan, and put them in charge range, even though I had to use advance and charge and +2 move on my turn 2 to really be able to get into him. Actually, I think it was turn 1, because I think he went first and just kind of full
Yeah.
sent.
Yeah.
And so with tank shock on the Lord of Skulls, with the charge mortals on the Lord on Juggernaut, I was able to chip off some wounds from one of the Catan, and then put them down in melee with the combined power of the Lord of Skulls and the Lord on Juggernaut. And then Angron was just doing Angron things, killing a race left and right with a Helbrute. And it really just put him in a spot where he had no resources, and he failed, unfortunately, some charges with the Nightbringer the next turn. And at that point, he just called the game, because he saw that there was no point in continuing. Oh, and I forgot to mention the 8 bound, of course, went yard again into his deployment zone, which, now that I'm saying that out loud, was kind of a theme that I kept sending them all the way into their deployment zone almost every game to take out some backline threats, because, again, they move so fast with
Yeah.
that scout.
Yeah, it sounds like this guy was used to being able to use his Catan to just bully people. He was used to being able to just go, I'm just going to go aggressive with them because nobody can kill them, and that doesn't necessarily work against world leaders, because we're fast enough and we do high damage that there's not much that we can't kill. The Catan are a challenge, but like you said, you can, one of my favorite things to do is to use the Juggernaut Lord, go in, whip a grenade at them, then charge them, do mortal wounds then, and if you've got a Lord of Skulls or a Mauler Fiend or something like that, you can charge in and do a tank shock, and now you've just handed them just a boatload of mortal wounds that's going to really start chipping them down, and then it doesn't matter if your Lord of Skulls is only doing 4 damage with his attacks. He's still going to kill the thing, because you've softened it up.
Exactly, which, I mean, honestly, I hadn't even thought about until I played that matchup, because that was the first time that I played the new Catan list with the world leaders. Unfortunately, the Juggernaut Lord was just out of range for the grenade strat, but he made his charge.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing all of those auxiliary mortals any chance you get really goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I also find, and I know you don't have it in your list, but one of my solutions for the Catan problem is just a unit of Khorne Berserkers, and you can either have a Master of Executions or Khan, it doesn't really matter. That unit just has such volume of attacks that it's gonna most likely kill even like the Nightbringer. So we definitely have the tools to kill those hard Necron targets, but I think your 20% prediction was probably also pretty accurate, because it is a very hard game.
Yeah, it was one that I was absolutely terrified in. And thankfully, I had some dice rolls that went well for me. Just the whole skew list that I had built was very difficult for him to try to crack in an effective way. Plus, I was able to leverage the terrain placement to put myself in a position where he kind of had to come at me early on, or else I was going to run away with primary without having to expose additional pieces. So again, that just goes to knowing when to charge and when not to charge, which is, it sounds like it's something real easy to know, but to play World Eaters well, I think that's really a skill that takes just a lot of games to get the feel of, because it's not something you really know, like, oh, in this situation I should be doing this, because every situation's different. It's really just a feel.
Yeah, there's no substitute for reps in my opinion. Just get all those reps, get those games in. As long as you have the right mindset to analyze the game afterwards and understand, oh, I went too hard or I didn't go hard enough, as long as you have that, then just get in a ton of reps and you'll develop those intuitions on when it's time to go hard and when it's time to pull back. Was that game against the Necrons, was that one also on Wargames Live streamed?
Yes, that was on their Patreon channel.
Okay, cool. So what I'll do is I'll grab links to those. I'll put them in the comments below. But sounds like an absolutely ripper of a showing by yourself, especially on such an off-meta, out there World Eaters list. It's good to see the Helbrutes getting some love. It's good to see the Demon Prince getting some love. It's good to see people pivoting away from the Exalted 8-bound and showing that there's other ways that the World Eaters can be run, and with great success. So, yeah, congratulations, man. I think you did an absolutely fantastic job.
Well, thank you. It really was. I didn't even believe it when it happened. When he said he resigned, I was like, oh, wow, I went 6-0 with World Eaters.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that. It really didn't sink in until about a week later that actually happened.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it can be a bit shocking, and like when he said that he was conceding the game, did you immediately grab his hand and shake it? That's one of my favorite moves. The second they say, "Yeah, no, I'm done, I'm conceding," I just immediately grab the hand and shake it, because the last thing you want is them to then turn around and be like, "Oh, actually, no, let's just play one more turn," and then they play a turn and they have a really good turn, and then they're back in the game, and you're like, "Damn it, I nearly had him."
Actually, I did the opposite. I said 3 different times, "Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure?" Because a lot's on the line at that point. And, I felt kind of bad, because I was like, well, I mean, maybe you could still do it. I mean, odds aren't likely, but it's a possibility, and I felt kind of bad. But again, it's a long tournament. 6 games is a lot.
Yeah, they are long tournament. Was this 4 games on day 1 and then 2, or was it 3 and 3?
It was 3 and 3.
Yeah. So when you've got when normally most of the tournaments I play are 5 round, and the first day is so grueling, and then on the second day only having to play 2 games, it feels so much better. But if you're playing 3 and then you've got to do another 3, it's I totally understand player fatigue. I think that's another one of those skills that's worth managing. If you can work on developing a resilience against that fatigue, that's going to massively help you, because the closer you get to the top, the harder the games get. So you don't actually get to relax. You have to do the opposite. You have to actually dial it up as the event goes on. So managing that's a huge skill.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is real. And then the decisions at those top tables, if you make the smallest decision that's wrong, or give your opponent an opening, they can take it, and then that's the whole game is over before you even realize what the mistake is that you made. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about reanalyzing some of your games, and being okay saying, "Hey, I'm human. I made a mistake here, and that's okay, but I'm learning from it."
Yeah, absolutely.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment, he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.
All right, so that sums up the event. I guess we've got a little bit of time left. Did you want to maybe give us your thoughts? And I know people are going to be asking this in the comments. What are your thoughts on the list and how it performed? And is there anything that you would change going forward, or are you more or less happy with it? And is there any other areas you're thinking of exploring with the World Eaters?
Yeah, so I think like we spoke about before, the Hellbrute, I wouldn't be opposed to running double fist, double flamers. I feel like that might offer a solution, especially to the Orc Green Tide that we might be seeing soon. Having a solution to that would be very good. Because I feel like the Melta, it was nice to have sometimes, but more often than not, I really just wanted to re-roll my wounds in melee because that's what we're all about. Another opportunity that I saw was the Demon Prince. Again, he was a holdover from my previous list with the Glaive, and I felt like he really didn't perform well for his points. What I might consider him to replace is maybe some Terminators as a rapid ingress threat, because that's what he was. He was my rapid ingress threat to respond to a weak board side or whatever, and he could kind of plop down where I needed, move 12, and get to where he needed to be and kill something where I needed it to be killed. So I think maybe having Terminators for similar points do the same thing might also be interesting. Because again, he just felt like a lot of the time with its damage 1 sweeps, it just wasn't what I needed.
Yeah, he doesn't have the volume of attacks, and he also doesn't have his strike attacks aren't scary enough, and his sweep attacks there's not enough of. So I feel like without the Glaive, he is definitely lacking somewhat.
Absolutely, yeah. I might also potentially look at a third squad of Chaos Spawn, because I just love those Chaos Spawn. They are just the utility that they bring to your list to do secondaries. Because I never picked fixed the entire time. I went tactical every single mission. And having that trash was really useful to score all of those points. Having one in reserve to come down and investigate signals, or coming on a board edge, do whatever I needed to do, was really major. As far as exploring other things, I do like the idea of the skew list and potentially the Mauler Fiend. I watched your channel before, and I know that other World Eaters have seen some success with the Mauler Fiend, and to me, that's really interesting, and I'd like to dig into that some more.
Yeah, there's one list sitting there in my app that's it's got 3 Mauler Fiends, 3 Helbrutes in it, and I'm like, it's just all this surprisingly tough bodies that can go in and do massive melee damage, and I think that's got a bit of potential. So yeah, I'm looking into exploring something similar myself. Today's video is brought to you by Proxy Wars. Head over to their website if you want to show some support to those who support this channel. Your thoughts on the upcoming balanced data slate, because I know that's another thing that people always put in the comments. They always want to know people's thoughts on that. Are there any particular World Eaters units that you think desperately need a buff and should go down in points? Is there anything that you think we could get away with a nerf and it still be viable? What are your thoughts?
I'm going to start with a real hot take here that I don't think a lot of people have talked about, and that's the Helldrake. I think if the Helldrake came down in points, that would be extremely interesting because of the +1 strength and attack and the World Eaters detachment. I think there's a lot of fun, interesting play that could be had if that comes down to a reasonable points level. I think it's like 210 now or something crazy like that, where it's not even worth like thinking about.
Yeah, it needs to come down to like 150, I reckon, somewhere around there. Like, it's a pretty significant points drop, but even if you put it side by side with a Mauler Fiend currently, you probably would rather just take the Mauler Fiend. So that means that it should be maybe equivalent points with the Mauler Fiend, with the Mauler Fiend. but it provides some really interesting stuff. It's got the anti-fly and the devastating wounds. It's also very fast, so there's definitely some things going for it. But yeah, I agree. If it comes down, it becomes very interesting.
I would love to run that and again have even more pressure, moving as fast as they do, doing the mortals on the flyover. I think is their special ability, and then just the profile. Like I kind of like in melee for world leaders. Some of the other things that I'd like to see for the balanced data slate is the poor 8-bound. I mean, it's our one real cool unit, and it really just needs to come down in price. It's too much, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think like somewhere between the previous points and their current points is probably fine. I think their current points is okay. I think a lot of World Eaters units, you look at them and the points seem just okay. But things like Angron, for example, like they can't nerf him because he is so critical to the way the army operates. It's like he has to stay. He's the only way to get reroll hits. So if your army has like good access to -1 to hit, the World Eaters is just rubbish. You need that reroll hits. He's also one of the only things in our army that effectively deals with things that have -1 damage, because most of our stuff, the 8-bound, the spawn, the berserkers, they're all damage 1 or damage 2. So he's one of the few things that can do big chunky damage. Like there's so many reasons why Angron has to be in every list. He's not put in every list because he's points efficient. He's often very much not points efficient. Often he goes in and he kills something worth 150 points, and then he dies, and then he doesn't come back. But he's in the list because he's a requirement for the faction. And I feel the same thing could be said with things like Jackals, right? For 70 points, like they are not worth that. They're not worth that many points. Most of the time they just sit on a backfield objective and achieve bugger all. They do the same role as the Chaos Space Marine cultists that are 55 points. But they're a requirement. They're something that we have to have. And as a result, everybody takes Angron and everybody takes Jackals. So GW might look at that and think, oh, well, they need to be nerfed because they're a must-have, that everyone's taking them, they must be OP. And it's like, no, that's wrong. I think the same thing could be said for 8-bound. There's lots of things where the points costs are, in my opinion, slightly too high, but we take them anyway.
Oh, exactly. It's a tax, unfortunately, and it's a pretty high tax that we pay just to play the army. And like you said, Angron usually isn't worth his points. More often than not, he kills one thing and then dies, and you don't get him back. Especially with the changes that they've made to Favorite of Corn. Unfortunately, he just doesn't get his points back most games. What he does offer the army is just a whole other playstyle and threat projection to really keep your opponent on their toes, and trying to leverage that, I think, is huge. But if you want to even more in points, I'd probably still pay it, but I wouldn't be happy. But I can't see him going up too much in points. I think the faction win rate, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 46, 48%, somewhere around there
it's
right now.
It's relatively low. So I don't think we'll get any major nerfs. I think anything that we do get will be buffs. But there was talk about this data slate being more about internal balance than it was about solving win rates. So they may be looking at it and going, cool, well, nobody takes Helbrutes, nobody takes Defilers, nobody takes Terminators. Take those units that nobody takes and buff them, and take the units that everybody takes, like Angron, Jackals, 8-bound, and nerf them. And they could try to do something like that to provide us with some internal balance. My main concern is that a lot of those things that everybody takes are already overcosted, and like you said, it's a tax that we're happy to pay the tax because the other things in the army are really, really good, and the playstyle is really, really effective. But on a points cost level, I'm slightly concerned that if they go for an internal balance, they're actually going to hurt the faction.
I agree. Unfortunately, I think that especially Exalted 8-bound shouldn't be. I mean, it's a hot take, I know. Shouldn't be taken just because they're way overcosted, and you can still get the same effect from other units. I think Terminators are very underutilized for the durability and the damage that they can bring right now. And I think it's a big mistake if they were to increase the points cost on 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound and decrease the cost on stuff that's not being taken just because it's not being taken. Because I think there's a lot of play already in stuff that's not being taken. I mean, you saw it on my list with the Helbrutes, with other lists with the Mauler Fiends. And I think there's a Terminator build maybe lurking out there that nobody's quite explored fully or had success with quite yet. But I think that there's a lot of play with those Terminators that we're just not quite seeing. Because if you compare them to other Terminators, they're already pretty cheap, and they hit way harder than any other Terminator out there.
Yeah, I really like the World Eaters Terminators, and I've sort of been sitting on this idea for a little bit. I haven't talked about it publicly too much because I'm sort of waiting to flesh it out fully. But one of the really good things about the World Eaters Terminators is you can take them in a unit of 10. And that's a really distinct difference from the 8-bound, which cap out at 6. Because a lot of people run that 6-man Exalted 8-bound brick. But the problem with that is if you go into somebody who has fights first or decent Overwatch, right? And you go in and they kill 3. Well, now you're only hitting them with 3 Exalted 8-bound. And that's often not going to be enough to deal with the thing that you've just charged. Whereas if you have 10 Terminators and they kill 3, well, now you're going in with 7 Terminators. And that is going to be enough to break the back of whatever it is that you just charged. So yeah, the unit's a fair bit more expensive, but it actually breaks through a critical breakpoint where, you know, that unit of Plague Marines that's sitting on an objective marker with, you know, the 5 Power Fists in the unit or 6 Power Fists or whatever it is, if you throw 6 Exalted 8-bound into that, they're going to kill 3 or 4 of your 8-bound with between Overwatch and fighting first, and then those 2 remaining 8-bound are not going to pick up the unit. And then you've actually just thrown your unit away and achieved nothing. Whereas with the Terminators, even if they do kill 4, you know, you're going to go in with those remaining 6 Terminators and you're going to rinse that Plague Marine unit. So, yeah, that Terminator thing, I think it has the capacity to turn some of those matchups that we traditionally look at and go, that's an unwinnable matchup for XYZ reason. The Terminators solve those specific challenges quite well. And then they also bring a little bit of shooting, which, like you said, the ability to clear screens and things like that with those bolters is something that the World Eaters lack. So being able to have solving the screening problem and solving the, you know, this breakpoint problem with things like Plague Marines, or, you know, this was a thing that I was considering with Custodies as well, because they have to fight first. So being able to charge your Terminators in, then when they fight first, you put -1 damage on, and now those Custodies are not killing a lot of your Terminators. Then your remaining unit is going to be big enough to kill those Custodies. But obviously with the new Custodies Codex, that's less relevant. But yeah, it's definitely they're underutilized for sure. And you proved the Helbrutes the same sort of deal. Imagine if Helbrutes get a points reduction, because currently not many people are fielding Helbrutes. And then if the Helbrutes go down 15 points, it's like next minute every World Eaters list is going to have 3 of them.
Exactly, it would just cause a lot more problems. But I think it is important. I mean, I think it's the internal balance is pretty good right now, because you do want 1 or 2 small units of 8-bound or Exalted 8-bound to go and do 8-bound things. I mean, they provide something, just like Ingron provides threat projection. They provide something that other units in the Codex don't necessarily have or can do, because they move so fast and then they do hit so hard, at a relatively, you know, small points cost if you just take 3, that you can't get elsewhere in the Codex, but you can't spam them because they are too expensive. So I think that's a good thing, where we're not just taking 1 unit. Granted, our Codex isn't that thick, so we don't get a whole lot of different things to choose from, which is unfortunate. But I would like them to try to do some maybe internal balance, but more so with the Berserkers and the characters, giving us a reason to want to run them. I feel, because I just have no desire to run them right now, because I feel like they get killed too easily, and then all of the characters that go with them are just way overcosted.
Yeah, they're definitely an interesting piece, the Berserkers. Like, I've played plenty of events where I've ran 2 units of 10 in Rhinos, but they're a weird unit in that they're very expensive. Like, when you have a unit of 10, so that's 200 points, you put in a character, now you're at 325 points, and then you've got a Rhino, so now you're at, like, you know, you're nearly at 400 points. Like, it's nearly a Lord of Skulls or a unit of 10 Berserkers in a Rhino, you know? It's like, you look at them side by side, and you're like, well, it's obviously the Lord of Skulls is way better than a unit of 10 Berserkers and a Rhino. But the Berserkers and the Rhino do some interesting stuff. They bring an extreme volume of attacks, so they're really good at dealing with things like Catan, certain tough pieces, because they just have so many attacks. Like the old Necron 20-man warrior brick, like the Berserkers were one of the few things that could reliably deal with that. And also the combination of fights first with Blood Surge moves and high OC, it's an interesting piece to play with, but I agree, they're way too expensive. Way too expensive. You mentioned how our codex isn't particularly thick. Let's have a quick chat about the upcoming codex, which might be 12 months away from now before we actually see a World Eaters codex. But what sort of things would you like to see in a new codex? What new units would you like to see added to the mix that would add something interesting to the way that our army plays?
I haven't thought too much about additional units. I mean, who doesn't want red bushers? But
Yeah.
Aside from that, I would really like to see a return to the 9th edition style that the book had, with the blood tithe points, because that was so fun for me and my opponent. My opponent was happy to kill my stuff. I was happy when my opponent killed my stuff. Everybody's happy. Blood for the blood god. That's what we're about. Come on.
Yeah, I 100% agree. When the Blessings of Khorne rule first came out, I was so disappointed. Yes, it's probably better competitively because it means you don't have to have taken casualties to activate the power of your units. So, yes, it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more powerful, but it's a lot less flavorful. I feel like this, random dice rolling thing, like that's a Tzeentch thing. That's something that the Thousand Sons should have. Our results should be based on how much shit is dead. That's what we should be going for.
Exactly. And Khorne cares not whether it's our stuff, their stuff. It doesn't matter. Stuff just needs to die, and that's a fun game.
Yeah. I even found with the stratagems that we got access to, there's the stratagem called Khorne Cares Not, and it gives us -1 damage. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. If Khorne doesn't care who dies, why do we have a stratagem that makes us less likely to die? That should have been a +1 damage stratagem instead of a -1 damage. Yeah. And it should be something that we can apply to our units and do damage to them. Like, maybe it's something where it's like, it's 1 CP, you gain +1 damage, but your opponent also gains +1 damage to you. Like, it's just like, just die. Everything just die.
Exactly. Or like a bomb of mortal wounds goes off and showers in blood, or something to that effect. Because I mean, that's just thematic, and that's the most fun I've ever had playing 40k is 9th edition War Leaders. So I'd love to see something like that. I would love to see some sort of cheaper shooting option. I mean, Mauler Fiends is too many points for no. It doesn't fit World Leaders. Skull Cannons are a great addition, or at least they were in 9th. 10th, not so much. But it does. Shooting does exist in Khorne, in the Khorne universe. Sure, it's not taken often, but having some sort of tool that might be taken. But I definitely don't want to see it spammed, because I mean that's not what we're here for.
You definitely don't want it to become a shooting army, but you want it to be, you want it to have the ability. So I think Teeth of Khorne is an interesting one. I'm not sure if you've heard of them in the lore, but that's essentially a Havoc squad where they all have heavy bolters and they just rain bullets into things, because heavy bolters cause massive amounts of bloodshed when they're exploding bodies and there's blood going everywhere. It's like Khorne himself doesn't actually care if it's done in combat or if it's done in shooting. He just wants maximum blood. So having those heavy bolter guys, that would be an interesting sort of piece where it's like, it's obviously you're not going to take an army of them and just heavy bolter things down, but having a unit that can provide that kind of shooting would be nice. I would also like to see more characters. I'd like to see a character that can lead our Terminators, different characters that can lead our 8-bound that aren't Juggernaut guys. Either that or a squad of Berserkers riding Juggernauts, so that the characters that join them actually kind of fits, because it kind of feels weird having a unit of foot slogging 8-bound with a Juggernaut Berserker leading them. Doesn't feel quite right. That's the sort of direction that I'd like to see it taken in, and I'd also like to see Dreadclaws, the Dreadclaws and the Cryptus Assault Claw, the old Forge World guys. Add them, make a new plastic kit for them, and add them to the World Eaters. I'd love to see that.
Absolutely, and maybe some berserkers on juggernauts.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be cool as. Alrighty, man. Well, thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it. I know it's what, midday over there for you now, probably like 1 or 2 o'clock. So I'll let you enjoy the rest of your day. But yeah, thanks for your time. Congratulations again on your fantastic results, and I will be keeping an eye on you for sure to see whether or not you can back it up with some more big wins.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on your channel. I really appreciated the opportunity, and hopefully we'll talk again.
Yep. Before we close off, do you have anything that you want to spruik? Any gaming clubs you're associated with? Any content that you're working on? Any upcoming tournaments you're planning to attend, or anything like that, so that people can follow you where you go?
No, not so much. I will be at the Tacoma GW event in a couple of months, but outside of that, unfortunately, life's just got me pretty busy right now.
Yeah, no, fair enough. All right. Well, good luck in your prep for that upcoming event, and I'll definitely be checking in on your results. And yeah, thanks again for your time, mate. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, thank you.
Cheers.
Look for the Blood God.